What's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to cover a tool that you can use to, one, help you transition away from tracking calories or tracking macronutrients, and two, become more in tune with your hunger and fullness signals. To give a little bit of background on this tool and how I came across it, I started lifting in 2006, didn't start tracking until mid-2013. I tracked for 3 years, a little over 3 years consistently, and then in mid-2016, after my last prep, I was extremely burned out on tracking and I wanted to get away from it. So I started researching different options for how to do that, and this is one of the tools that I came across and I used to help me do that, and I found it extremely helpful. Along with that, I found it so helpful that for the last few years, I've shared it with a lot of my clients, and every single person that I've shared it with has also found it to be very helpful, and they've also really enjoyed using it. So that said, let's get into the tool. So this is the tool. It is a hunger and fullness scale. There are a lot of different versions of this scale. This is one that I created. I modified a few different versions to come up with this one. I found this one to be the easiest to use. Essentially what this does is it lets you take those feelings of hunger and fullness that you experience and rate them. So on this scale, a 1 represents ravenous, a 10 represents stuffed, and a 5 represents neutral, meaning you're not experiencing sensations in either direction. So what this does is it lets you take statements like, I'm starving, I'm famished, I'm stuffed, I'm kind of hungry, and assign a number to them. When you use this scale, it's used to assign two different ratings. The first rating is a pre-meal, pre-snack rating. And to do this, what I do is I take a deep breath, clear my mind, and then I ask myself the question, am I physically hungry at all? What this does is by asking, am I physically hungry at all, physically helps you to tune in and focus on those physical sensations that you're experiencing and shift away from any stimuli or psychological triggers that may be wanting you to eat. So it really helps you tune into those physical sensations. And by asking at all, this helps you discern which half of the scale you should be on. So that 5 represents neutral. So by asking, am I physically hungry at all, you can say, okay, if I'm hungry at all, this means my number is going to be somewhere between 1 to 5. And if I'm not hungry at all, that means my number is going to be somewhere between 5 to 10. Once I've done that, once I've just determined which half of the scale I'm on, then I tune in further to those physical sensations I'm experiencing, and I use my past experience using the scale to give myself a specific number. So a 3 or a 3.5. The second rating is a post-meal, post-snack rating. And for this one, what you do is you just finish eating, and once you're done eating, you wait about 20 minutes, and then you rate your level of fullness. The reason that on this one you would want to wait 20 minutes after you finish eating versus assigning a number right away is that feelings of fullness can have a delay, and it takes time for your body's feedback to you to be felt and interpreted. So this 20-minute period allows sufficient time for that feedback. The analogy that I always use to describe this is it's like a car. The cars that have the needle. So when you put gas in them and you start driving, the needle isn't automatically at the top. It takes time for that float in the gas tank to rise until you figure out where you actually are in terms of your gas and how much gas you have. And it's very similar with our fullness signals. It's when you finish a meal, 5 minutes later, you feel a little bit more full. 10 minutes later, you're a little bit more full. And then we've all had the experience where now 20 minutes later, you're stuffed and it kind of hits you out of nowhere. But it just takes time for that feedback to be felt. There are a lot of different ways you can use this hunger and fullness scale. In this video, I'm going to share one of my favorite strategies. So in most circumstances, my goal is to stay between a 3 and a 7.5. And my rationale for this is, one, the hungrier you are, the better food tastes, and the more likely you are to overeat. By keeping yourself at about a 3 or above, and a 3 on this scale just represents a normal level of hunger. So you're not starving, you're not famished, it's just a normal level of hunger. By keeping yourself at a 3 or above, this will prevent you from experiencing those intense physiological feelings that can cause you to overeat, to massively overshoot where you would normally stop a meal, and then which lead to subsequent feelings of physical and psychological discomfort. Another personal preference of mine is I like to keep myself most of the time at about a 7.5 or lower, because I found that this allows me to maintain good energy, good mental clarity throughout the day by preventing the effects that can come from eating too much, such as tiredness and decreased mental clarity. And again, for me, just from experience using the scale, I found that these undesirable effects tend to happen at about an 8 or an 8.5 for me. So the title of this video and how I framed this video is a tool that someone can use to help them transition away from tracking their calories or help them transition away from tracking their macronutrients. And that's true, but there's also a lot of different scenarios or a lot of different people who can benefit from using this scale who aren't trying to transition away. The first group is the group we've already talked about, and that's people who are currently tracking and who are wanting to transition away from doing so. In this situation, it's great because because when you track, you learn a ton about food, serving sizes, calorie contents, your own personal needs, and so you can use all that knowledge that you learned from your time spent tracking and combine that with a system like this, which helps you tune into your hunger and fullness circles to really help you come full circle. And what that looks like is you use your hunger and fullness signals to guide when you eat and how much you eat to a degree, and then you use all of that knowledge you gained about food and about yourself to help you make decisions that align with your goals. The second point about using this scale with this group of people is that it can serve as a great transitional step. And what I mean by that is, I know for me it was like when I tracked for that little over 3-year period, I hadn't stopped at all during that time, and it kind of felt weird to just say, okay, I'm just not going to do anything or track anything, and it kind of just felt like I needed something to assist with that. And so this tool serves as a great transitional step because it still lets you use numbers to help give you some guidance on when to eat and how much to eat, because when you're tracking things with a food scale and MyFitnessPal and all that, you are used to using numbers to track your food intake. So this still allows you to use numbers as some sort of a guide to help you regulate your intake. And alongside that, it also helps you to learn to tune into your hunger and fullness signals more, which is the ultimate goal of what we're trying to get to in this situation. Another group of people who can benefit from this scale are people who are currently tracking and they want to keep doing so. And I think this is an important distinction to make, is that tracking your calorie intake, tracking your macronutrient intake, and using this hunger and fullness scale or paying attention to your hunger and satiety signals, they're not mutually exclusive, and in fact, they should be used in concert with each other. So what this allows you to do is when you use them together is it allows you to be more strategic with your intake. So the difference between the people in scenario number 2 and people in scenario number 1 is in both situations, you're still using your hunger and fullness signals to guide when you eat and to guide how much you eat to a degree. The only difference is in scenario number 2 is that you are tracking, so you do kind of have a cap. So whether you're tracking protein, fat, and carbs or calories, you do have a total amount that you consume. But what this allows you to do is it allows you to adjust your intake so that you're eating when you're actually hungry, and when you're not hungry, you're saving calories for when you are actually hungry. Both, and doing that can increase adherence and enjoyment. The third group is people who have never tracked before. Someone doesn't have to have tracked calories or tracked macronutrients before to use this scale. This tool can still be a great tool to help someone who has never paid attention to their hunger and fullness signals, to help them get more in tune with those and to learn to pay attention to when they're actually hungry and when they're not hungry. So just like learning to track your calorie intake, learning to use a food scale in MyFitnessPal was a skill, and just like being able to go out to eat and look at a dinner plate and be able to estimate how many calories are in something is a skill, so is being able to give an accurate numerical value to the feelings of hunger and fullness you experience. It's a skill that takes time to learn. However, that said, the more you practice it, the easier it gets and the better you get at doing it. That's it for this video. I hope you got something out of it, and I'll see you in the next one.